What happens when you try to prank a sleeping man in a barber chair and accidentally activate reflexes that have been armed since 1968? How does shaving cream in the palm become a threat assessment in less than a second? And why did a retired Navy Master Chief call the base security office to review footage? This is Fort Bragg, a can of shaving cream, two young soldiers, and the moment they learned that some men never truly leave the war behind. The answer would be preserved on the barbershop's security cameras, studied by instructors, whispered about in mess halls, because Jack Keller wasn't just getting a haircut. He was a weapon system in standby mode, and weapon systems don't distinguish between pranks and threats. But let's start at the beginning. Fort Bragg's base barbershop occupied a small brick building between the PX and the main administrative offices. It was a relic from a different era, the kind of place that smelled like aftershave and hot towels, where conversations moved at the same unhurried pace as the ceiling fans that circulated the August heat. Master Chief Petty Officer Donald Price, retired Navy, had been cutting hair there for 12 years. At 68, he'd traded his uniform for barber's scissors, but his shop maintained military standards. Sharp fades, clean lines, no complaints. The afternoon crowd was typical. 3 soldiers waiting on the bench, 2 more in chairs getting trimmed. The radio playing classic rock at a volume that allowed conversation but discouraged it. Price was finishing up a high and tight on a young Marine when Jack Keller walked in. Price looked up, did a double take, then went completely still, his scissors frozen mid-cut. The Marine in his chair noticed the sudden pause. "Chief, you okay?" Price blinked, recovered. Yeah, I'm good." But his eyes stayed on the old man who'd just entered. Jack Keller was 73 years old and looked like someone's grandfather. White hair, cropped short in a style that hadn't changed since the 1970s. Weathered face with deep lines around the eyes. Simple civilian clothes, khaki pants, a faded navy t-shirt, running shoes that had seen better days. He carried himself with the careful economy of someone whose joints had logged too many miles. "Help you, sir?" Price's voice was carefully neutral. "Haircut, when you've got time," Jack said. "No rush. I'm here for the reunion this weekend." "Vietnam." "Yeah." Jack settled into one of the waiting chairs, picking up a months-old Sports Illustrated. Price finished the Marine's cut in silence, swept up, then gestured Jack to the chair. As the old man settled in, Price leaned close. "Do I know you from somewhere?" Jack met his eyes in the mirror, studied him for a moment. "Maybe." "You serve?" 26 years. Retired Master Chief, small boat operations mostly. Did some time at Coronado. Something flickered in Jack's expression. Recognition, maybe, or just the acknowledgement of a fellow veteran. "Long time ago for me. Different world." Price draped the cape around Jack's shoulders, started the consultation about length and style. But his hands were shaking slightly. He kept looking at the old man's face, like he was trying to place it in a memory that wouldn't quite surface. "You mind if I recline you back?" Price asked. "Get a better angle for the neck trim." "Sure." Price tilted the barber chair back to a comfortable angle, placed a hot towel over Jack's face to prep the skin. Within 2 minutes, Jack's breathing had slowed to the deep, regular rhythm of sleep. Or something that looked like it. Private First-Class Mason had been watching from the waiting bench. At 21, he was the kind of soldier who never quite read the room, never quite understood when jokes stopped being funny. He nudged Specialist Rivera, pointed at the reclining figure with the towel covering his face. "Dude's completely out," Mason whispered. "Old guy can fall asleep anywhere." Rivera glanced over, shrugged. "So, let him rest. I got a better idea." Mason pulled out his phone, scrolled through his apps until he found what he wanted. Then he reached into his gym bag and produced a can of shaving cream. "Classic prank. We put some in his hand, tickle his nose, He slaps himself with foam. Gold. Man, that's juvenile, Rivera said, but he was already smiling. You recording? Rivera held up his phone. Yeah, go. Mason approached the barber chair with exaggerated stealth, playing to the camera. Two other young soldiers waiting for cuts leaned forward to watch. Price was in the back room, cleaning clippers, unaware of what was developing. Mason shook the can. The ball inside rattled. He pressed the nozzle, filling his left palm with a generous amount of white foam. Then, with his right hand, he carefully extended the can toward Jack's left hand, which rested on the chair's armrest. The nozzle touched the old man's palm. Foam began to dispense. What happened next lasted exactly 2.3 seconds, according to the security footage timestamp. At 0.0 seconds, the foam made contact with skin. At 0.4 seconds, Jack's eyes opened beneath the towel, not the slow, confused surfacing of interrupted sleep. They opened like switches being thrown, already focused, already processing. At 0.9 seconds, Jack's right hand moved. It wasn't a grab. It was a strike that transitioned into a seizure. His hand wrapped around Mason's wrist, the one holding the shaving cream can, with a grip that turned the private's fingers white. At 1.3 seconds, Jack's left hand, now covered in foam, shot out and caught Rivera by the collar. The phone dropped, still recording as it bounced across the floor. At 1.8 seconds, both young soldiers were on the ground. Mason, face down with his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that promised broken bones if he moved. Rivera on his back with the foam-covered hand, pressed against his throat, not choking but absolutely controlling. At 2.3 seconds, Jack was on his feet. The towel had fallen away. The barber cape was on the floor. He stood in a combat crouch, knees bent, weight balanced, free hand raised in a guard position that belonged in a different decade. His eyes scanned the barbershop with mechanical precision. Contact! His voice was a command bark that made everyone in the shop flinch. How many? His breathing hadn't changed, deep and controlled. The sudden eruption from rest to combat readiness hadn't elevated his heart rate. Mason's fitness watch, pressed against the floor beneath him, recorded an increase of exactly 7 beats per minute. The old man wasn't panicked, wasn't confused. He was operational. Price burst out of the back room, saw the scene, and went pale. Jesus Christ! Cutlass! Something in Jack's eyes shifted. The targeting system began to power down. He looked at the two young men on the floor, at the shaving cream scattered across the tile, at the other soldiers pressed against the walls. Ah! He released both men and stepped back, his posture returning to the harmless, elderly shuffle. The transformation was instant. Weapon system to grandfather in the space of a blink. Shaving cream! You were going to make me hit myself. It wasn't a question. Mason scrambled up, holding his wrist where white finger marks were already darkening to bruises. Sir, I'm so sorry. It was just a prank. I didn't mean to assault a man while he was vulnerable. Jack's voice carried no anger, just a kind of tired familiarity with stupid decisions. In my world, that gets you a broken arm. You're lucky this isn't my world anymore. Price moved between them, his own military bearing suddenly very present. Both of you. Sit down, don't move, don't talk. He turned to Jack, and for the first time, the young soldiers saw genuine fear in a senior enlisted man's expression. Sir, I didn't know you were here. If I'd known, I would have. It's fine, Don. Jack picked up the towel, wiped the shaving cream from his hand. You couldn't have known. I don't exactly announce myself. These kids have no idea who you are. That's probably for the best. Price pulled out his phone, made a call. "This is Master Chief Price at the barbershop. I need the duty officer to come down here." "No, not an emergency. But someone needs to explain some things to some young soldiers before they do something really stupid." He paused. "Tell him it's about Senior Chief Keller. He'll understand." While they waited, an uncomfortable silence filled the shop. Mason and Rivera sat frozen on the bench, still trying to process what had just happened. Jack returned to the barber chair, settling back into position like nothing had occurred. "You still want that haircut?" Price asked. "Drove all the way here for it. Might as well finish." Price draped the cape back over Jack's shoulders, with hands that shook slightly. "Sir, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. These kids, they don't know. They haven't seen anything yet." "Most of them never will," Jack said, closing his eyes. "That's the whole point of what we did, so they could be this stupid and survive it." The duty officer who arrived 10 minutes later was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, Navy liaison to the Joint Base. She was 42, with enough combat deployments to recognize significance when she saw it. She took one look at Jack sitting peacefully in the barber chair, then at the two pale young soldiers on the bench, and her expression hardened. "Outside," she told Mason and Rivera. "Now." On the sidewalk in front of the barbershop, she positioned them at attention and pulled up something on her tablet. "Do either of you know who that man is?" They shook their heads. "That is Senior Chief Jack Keller, United States Navy, retired. He's here for a Vietnam veterans reunion." She paused. "He's also the reason half the Navy SEALs currently in service made it through Butt-ass." Mason's eyes widened. "He's a SEAL." "Was, but that's not the important part. From 1975 to 1990, Senior Chief Keller was the primary Hell Week instructor at Basic Underwater DEMOLITION/SEAL training. 15 years. Do you understand what that means?" Rivera found his voice. "He ran Hell Week. He didn't just run it. He designed half of it. He's the one who made the hardest military training in the world even harder. They called him Cutlass. You know why?" Both soldiers shook their heads. "Because he would cut candidates who quit. Not physically, but he had this way of looking at someone and knowing they were done. He'd walk up, put his hand on their shoulder and say, 'You're cut.' No anger, no judgment, just a statement of fact. And he was never wrong." Chen pulled up a photo on her tablet. A younger Jack Keller, maybe 45, standing on a beach in combat boots and a brown t-shirt. Behind him, a class of Butt-ass candidates were doing flutter kicks in the surf, their faces twisted in agony. Over 2,000 Navy SEALs went through his Hell Week. Admirals, Master Chiefs, men who've done things that will never be declassified. And every single one of them still has nightmares about this man. Not because he was cruel, because he was harder than anything they thought possible. And he made them harder too. She let that sink in. He taught them to function without sleep. Real sleep. For days at a time, he conditioned their nervous systems to stay alert even when their bodies shut down. It's a survival skill for special operations. You rest, but you never fully sleep. Because in his world, in their world, sleep gets you killed. Mason's voice was small. "We just tried to prank a Navy SEAL instructor. You tried to prank a man whose reflexes have been combat-ready for 50 years. A man who trained his body to respond to threats before his conscious mind even processes them. You touched his hand while he was in a vulnerable position. What did you think would happen?" Rivera was crying now, silent tears running down his face. "Ma'am, I didn't know. We didn't know. Now you do." Chen's voice softened slightly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're both going to go back in there. You're going to apologize properly. And then you're going to sit through the rest of his haircut in absolute silence, thinking about what you learned today." They did exactly that. When they re-entered the barbershop, Jack was still in the chair, his eyes closed, his breathing slow and even. Price was carefully trimming around his ears. "Sir," Mason said, his voice cracking, "I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. I was disrespectful and stupid, and I'm sorry." Jack opened his eyes, looked at the young man in the mirror. "You know what Hell Week is?" "Yes, sir. It's 5.5 days without real sleep. We keep you moving, keep you uncomfortable, keep you questioning whether you can last another minute. Most candidates hallucinate by day 3. They see things that aren't there. They forget their own names." He paused. "I taught thousands of men to push through that, to rest while still being ready to fight, to close their eyes but never truly sleep." He reached up, touched the side of his head. "That training never leaves you. Even now, decades later, I can't sleep like normal people. I rest, I close my eyes, but some part of my brain is always watching, always ready. You touched my hand while I was resting. My body responded before I knew it was you. Before I knew it was 2024 and not 1968. Before I knew it was shaving cream and not something worse." Mason nodded, unable to speak. "The instincts that kept me alive through 3 tours in Vietnam, that helped me train men for the most dangerous missions in the world. They don't have an off switch. I carry them every day, every night, every moment someone touches me unexpectedly. Some part of me thinks I'm back in the jungle, with someone trying to kill me." He looked at Rivera. "You were filming for laughs. I get it. You're young, you're bored. An old man falling asleep seemed like easy entertainment. But you need to understand something. Every veteran you see carries wars you can't imagine. The funny old guy at the grocery store might be the sniper who saved his whole platoon. The quiet janitor might have pulled his friends out of burning vehicles. The man falling asleep in a barber chair might have broken men who were tougher than you'll ever be." Price finished the trim, brushed off Jack's neck, removed the cape. Jack stood slowly, his joints protesting the sudden movement earlier. He pulled out his wallet to pay. "On the house," Price said quietly. "It's an honor." Jack nodded, then turned to the 2 young soldiers. "You want to make this right? Really make it right?" "Yes, sir," they said in unison. "Come to the reunion breakfast tomorrow morning. Building 52, 0800 hours. Ask to hear some stories. Actually listen. Learn something about the people you're so eager to disrespect." The next morning, Mason and Rivera showed up at 0750 in pressed uniforms, 15 minutes early. They found Jack at a table with 5 other Vietnam veterans, all in their 70s, all looking like somebody's grandfather. Jack waved them over. "These are the kids I told you about. They want to learn." What followed was 3 hours of stories, not war stories exactly. Stories about what it meant to serve, about the cost of training to be the best, about the invisible weights that veterans carry long after the uniforms come off. One of the veterans, a former SEAL Team 2 operator, told them about the night Jack personally pulled him out of the surf during Hell Week when he was seconds from drowning. "I'd given up, I was done, and this man, this instructor who we thought was the devil himself, he jumped in and dragged me back. Then he got in my face and said, 'You don't get to quit on my watch, you're better than this.' I finished Hell Week, served 23 years, because of him." Another veteran, now a VA counselor, talked about the nightmares. "We all have them. Every single one of us. Combat veterans, we don't sleep the same. It's not PTSD. Well, not just PTSD, it's conditioning. We were trained to stay alert, to rest without sleeping, to always be ready. That's what Senior Chief Keller taught us, and it saved our lives in combat. But it also means we can never fully relax, never truly sleep peacefully. It's the price we pay." When they finally left, Jack walked them to the door. "You'll be all right," he said. "You're young enough to learn and humble enough now to listen. That's more than most." Mason never forgot those words. 12 years later, as a chief petty officer with 2 deployments and a chest full of ribbons, he would tell the story of the day he tried to prank a Navy SEAL Hell Week instructor. He told it to young sailors who thought they knew everything. He told it as a lesson about assumptions, about respect, about the invisible warriors who walk among us carrying burdens we can't see. And every time he told it, he included the detail that mattered most. In that 2.3-second response, when an old man in a barber chair became a weapon system, Jack Keller's heart rate had only increased by 7 beats per minute. Because some training never fades, some instincts never sleep, and some men carry the war long after the shooting stops. The question isn't whether they can turn it off. The question is whether we're grateful they never had to find out if they could. The security footage from that day was eventually incorporated into a training module at the Naval Special Warfare Center. Not as a prank gone wrong, but as a case study in conditioned response and the lasting effects of elite military training. The timestamp on the video read 14:37:22 when the shaving cream touched Jack's palm. By 14:37:24, both young soldiers were on the ground. The instructors who showed the footage would pause it frame by frame, highlighting the mechanical precision of Jack's response. This, they would tell their students, is what happens when you train the human nervous system to bypass conscious thought. Senior Chief Keller's body responded to a perceived threat in the same time it takes most people to blink. His heart rate barely changed. His breathing remained controlled. This is the standard we're training you to meet. The video always ended with the same freeze frame. Jack standing in combat stance, eyes scanning for additional threats, while Mason and Rivera lay immobilized on the floor. The caption beneath it read, "Operational readiness is not a choice, it's a permanent condition." Master Chief Price kept a photo on the wall of his barbershop. It showed him and Jack on the day of the reunion. Both men smiling, Price's hand on Jack's shoulder. Beneath it was a small plaque. Senior Chief Jack Cutlass Keller, Hell Week instructor, 1975 to 1990. A legend among legends. When young soldiers would come in for haircuts and ask about it, Price would tell them a carefully edited version of the shaving cream incident. He'd leave out the names of the pranksters. They'd learned their lesson and didn't need to carry that mistake forever. But he'd tell the story of the response, the 2.3 seconds, the 7 beat per minute increase, the transformation from sleeping grandfather to operational weapon system. That man, Price would say, pointing at the photo, trained men to be harder than steel, and he was harder than all of them. Still is. At 73, he could probably still take half the soldiers on this base. Not because he's strong, because he's been ready for 50 years and never figured out how to stop. The lesson spread, not just through the story, but through the understanding it created. Young soldiers began looking at elderly veterans differently. The old man struggling with his groceries might have been a sniper. The quiet guy at the VA clinic might have saved a dozen lives under fire. The sleeping figure on the bus might be a weapon system in standby mode, and they learned to show respect, not because they had to, because they understood what those men had given up to earn that white hair and those weathered faces. They'd given up normal sleep, normal reflexes, the ability to ever truly relax. They'd rewired their nervous systems for survival, and those changes were permanent. Jack Keller continued attending the reunions every year. He would sit in the same waiting area, settle into the same barber chair, let Price put the same hot towel over his face. And he would rest, never sleep, while the world moved around him. The young soldiers who saw him there gave him space. Word had gotten around. Everyone knew the story. Everyone knew that beneath that harmless exterior was a man who had made Navy SEALs cry, who had designed training protocols still used today, who could go from rest to combat, ready faster than most people could process what was happening. They called him Sir. They thanked him for his service. They didn't try pranks, and Jack, for his part, was grateful for that. Not because he couldn't handle it, he'd proven he could, but because he was tired. Tired of being a weapon, tired of the reflexes that wouldn't let him sleep, tired of carrying 1968 into 2024. He just wanted to get his hair cut in peace. And now, finally, he could.